We've given people time if they ended up at the community center in care rooms. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Granby on December 16th, 1993 at 7 p.m. at the Granby Town Hall. That is a change. It originally said community center. Hopefully everybody saw the thing on the wall over there, or on the door, that it's been changed to here. County Route 8, Town of Granby, New York, for the purpose of considering an application for a special use permit for the excavation of sand and gravel from property located on County Route 8 and County Route 85. Said premises being owned by Robert B. Ferguson, and an application being submitted by Richard B. Ferguson. Are the Fergusons here this evening? Okie doke. Would you come forward, please, and state what you're applying to do and plan to do, and
Good evening, I'm Richard, and my father isn't present tonight. He wants to talk.
no problem. Please speak up so that everybody.
I'm Richard, and my dad isn't here tonight. He lives there on the property, and we have a plan put together for removing some sand and gravel of what we feel is a small operation compared to many others. We're a small construction company, basically residential, and we own one rubber tire backhoe, one small loader, and basically one 10-wheel dump truck and one 6-wheel dump truck. Mr. Rob Snyder, who is a geologist in this area, helped put together a site plan for the DEC and for the appropriate town committees or boards. And what I'd like to do is the operation or phases of operations is basically turn it over to Mr. Snyder, who actually formulated this plan in conjunction with us. Okay. Yep.
Excuse me one second. This is all being recorded, so please speak up.
Yes.
And your back is to the person recording it.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
My name is Rob Snyder, as Rick mentioned. I'm with a company called Northeast Geological Services, and I prepared a plan to excavate sand and gravel from the proposed site. What I'd like to do first is I'd like to tell you basically about Ferguson Beach Limited, because obviously we're aware of many concerns that you people have, and justifiably so, but we hope to make a distinction between us and the other users in the area. Ferguson Beach Limited, as Rick mentioned, is a small construction company. They primarily do residential septic systems, driveways, and that sort of thing, residential construction in general. Basically, the company consists of Rick and his brother, and they've got two hired hands. And when Rick and his brother aren't driving the trucks, the two hired hands are driving the trucks, and the other two are operating the equipment. The company is owned by Rick's father, Robert Ferguson, and to give you an idea of the scale of their operation, they hauled a total of 5,000 cubic yards in 1993. Basically, this particular operation is what is referred to as a dry surface unconsolidated operation, which means the dry portion of that means that there's no intention of mining to the water. We're going to stay above the water table. It's a surface operation, meaning it's going to stay on the surface, obviously. And it's an unconsolidated operation in that we're only mining sand and gravel. There's going to be no bedrock or anything exposed or mined. And as I say, there will be no intention of going to the water table. Basically, the operation consists of about 30 acres. Now, what we've indicated in our plan to the DEC and to the town, and obviously publicly here to you, is that no more than 5 acres will be exposed at any one time. We said in the EAF, the environmental assessment form, to the DEC that that would be 4.5 acres. So basically, it's going to be less than 5 acres. There'll only be Rick and his brother hauling from the pit. As he says, they have one 10-wheel tandem axle truck, which you probably are all intimately familiar with because they go up and down your past your houses every day, and one 6-wheel truck, which is a smaller version of a 10-wheel tandem axle truck. We met with the planning board. Well, to back up a little bit, basically the mining operation will consist of this. That site, if you're familiar with it, has a series of small rolling, what I call 4-way dip features. They're small highs, and there's noses coming off of a big ridge, which is along Route 8 to the east of the pit. The noses come off the ridge, and there's a series of isolated highs in the 30 acres. And basically the plan is to come along and take those 4-way dip features, those small highs, and plane them off to the level of the valley. The site's the reason they're doing that and not going into the valley floor is because they want to return the site to agricultural use when it's done. Right now there's cattle grazing there and horses and some sheep and various other farm animals, and they want to return it to that use when done. There will be processing on site. They have a reed screen-all. It's a Reed Model 40. It has a capacity of about 50 cubic yards, plus or minus 50 to 70 cubic yards. As Rick said, they have a 4-wheel rubber tire loader, which has about a 2-yard bucket on it. So that's basically a given indication of their capacity. They will be processing material only to satisfy their project demand. They're not going to be selling from the pit. There'll be no residential sale. There'll be no retail sales from the pit. There'll be no wholesale sales from the pit. It'll only be used to satisfy their project requirements. And obviously, we hope to have this entered into the record, and we will obviously commit to it, and Rick will commit to it. Rick has also been very conscious of concerns generated by people. I guess we got a letter at the DEC back as far back as November 8th. Actually about in the middle of the review process, and it listed a number of concerns. Some of them I think were misinterpretations of the data, but that's neither here nor there. Rick has responded, and basically has indicated that he's willing to do certain things, and he's willing to have that put into the record. And basically what it accomplishes is it puts a limit on his activity as far as future development and as far as his operational development on a day-to-day basis. Basically, Rick and I have been up there, and we have
observed the truck traffic. We sat on County Route 8 and County Route 85, and we went up to Northern's pit and sat out in front of their pit for a while and saw the 18-wheelers going in and out. And Rick did not wish to present a hardship to the people in the area, although, you know, obviously you may have a different interpretation, but basically Rick has agreed to this, that the bulk of their work is done in Scriba, and that's just a historical fact that is just in the record. And he expects that probably to continue just because that's their primary base of operation. They happen to own land in this particular area for a variety of reasons. Mr. Ferguson, Rick's father, lives on the site, and he continues to reside on the site. He has a house there, and he recently constructed a house and put in a well. And he intends to live there because he will be monitoring the day-to-day operations. And by the way, he will be there available to anyone who has any problems with this operation. So it's not like somebody having to run up to Oswego or find somebody over on the east side of Fulton to find someone to complain to. Mr. Ferguson will be there and will be readily available to answer any problems or take any complaints. But getting back to my original point, their major base of operation is in Scriba. So what they're going to do is they're going to use this pit to satisfy their project demands, residential septic, residential construction. They're going to come out of the pit and they're going to turn right on 85 and then turn north on 8. And basically they're going to head right up through Minetto and towards Scriba. Now, given the level of truck activity in the area, which we've observed to be intense, Rick has said that what he's going to do is he's going to take gravel from the pit and he's going to place it in strategic locations in Scriba along County Route 104, or State Route 104. And what he's going to do is, and one of the things he will commit to, obviously publicly here, is that that when there is intense truck activity on the roads that he's hauling on or nearby the pit, that he will haul from the strategically placed stockpiles on 104, and he will not haul from his own pit. And of course, Mr. Lund can monitor that situation, and if you have a problem with that, and you feel that Mr. Ferguson is hauling in a time when there's intense traffic, Rick's father will be on the site. Basically, we've also moved the processing area 450 feet further south to get it further away from County Route 85. In building Mr. Ferguson's house, they discovered Mr. Ferguson has a dug well up by County Route 8. And what he discovered is he found water about 22 feet, but what he discovered was that the water filled up in his dug well to near the surface. So what we've decided to do is to modify the mining plan so that we've proposed to mine along the bank, along that plateau, that ridge that's along County Route 8, extends north and south along County Route 8, right by the intersection there. Not by the intersection, but you know, it's a plateau-like feature. They intend to scour off the edge of that bank to get gravel. So what we're going to do is, because of the new data that we have with respect to his well, we're going to have to evaluate geologically that situation, because that would put the water table structurally high to some portions of the mine floor, which, by the way, is not going to intersect the water table, and it's not our intent to intersect the water table. So what we've got to do is we've got to evaluate that situation before we mine that area, if we do. So what we're going to do is we're going to make that area the last area that we mine after we evaluate that geologically, because there's something going on there that is not readily apparent. So what we're going to do is, first we're going to mine out the small four-way dip features. We're going to plane them off to the level of the valley. So if you get into the low areas in the valley, we're not going below the level of those low areas. And then we're going to mine out the noses coming off the ridge. And then we're going to, while this is going on, we'll be evaluating the situation geologically up along Route 8. And depending on how that situation comes out, we'll have to adjust our plans accordingly. But basically, that's a situation. We have committed to the DEC and we've committed to the town that we're not going to affect more than 4.5 or less than 5 acres in the next 5 years. So basically, a concern of yours, or something that you should be thinking about if you haven't already, is, you know, how do you determine whether the situation is going to wind up like a Northern or a General Stone, not General Stone, a Northern or a Pritchard or a Meany? Well, basically, we've indicated no more than 4.5 acres in the next 5 years. So that places a limit operationally on the scope and scale of the operation. And we've also limited the number of truckloads per hour that can come out of the pit. And we've indicated that in the application as well. Basically, that is the situation, and that's how it intends to operate. I do have a letter to the town. Which basically this commits to and highlights all the proposals that Rick has made. And I'll give that to you now for your reference. Rick has also agreed to bring up to speed with the process so far. Rick has agreed to conform to all the requirements of the planning board that they placed on the operation of the mine. He agreed without stipulation to the conditions imposed by the planning board. We have no conditions from the DEC yet because they have decided to reopen the public comment period to the 24th. Essentially, that ended on the 12th, or December 2nd, but Kevin has decided to reopen the public comment period, and obviously we'd be happy to respond to any comments that might be generated during that period.
Excuse me, when you say the planning board, are you saying county planning board or town planning board, town of Granby?
In fact, both. The town of Granby Planning Board has sent us a letter after meeting with them indicating that they had placed certain stipulations on the action, and we have responded in writing indicating that we agree to conform to those stipulations. That was in their September 13th letter to Ferguson Beach.
Do we have a copy of that one? I don't think we do.
There is a copy. I have a copy.
We don't have a copy.
We also, Rick also agreed to move the Hall Road to the east side of the cemetery. There was a line of sight consideration there, which we will do. Also, there's another consideration too. It should be important. I don't know. It should be important to everyone, obviously. But that is that Rick agrees to reclaim concurrently, and that's definitely a measure of someone's particular operation. If you know of a particular operation and they indicate that they plan to reclaim concurrently, which means that they will reclaim as they're mining, that is probably one of the best ways of determining the validity of that operation, or whether that operation is going to conform to what they say they're going to do. If they say they're going to keep less than 5 acres exposed, and in 6 years they've got 15 acres exposed, there's a problem, obviously. If they have 5 acres exposed, and they're done with their permit term and they're up for renewal, and they reclaim while they're opening up more acres, then that's definitely a measure of how well that operation is conducted. I guess I've covered everything in the letter. We've indicated a maximum of 6 loads per hour. Obviously, that would be an extreme condition in a particular situation where they may have a project very close to the site. But as I say, most of the work is done in Scribe. And basically, I think we've covered it.
I realize this is going to take some time, but I think everybody should know about it. But we don't have a letter from the planning board. I think the public should know exactly what this letter is. So if you would read it, or I would be glad to read it.
Read this letter?
Yes.
Okay.
I would appreciate it.
This is a letter addressed to Mr. Wilcox, as chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And basically what it states is that in addition to agreeing to the recommendations that Town of Granby Planning Board expressed in their letter dated September 13th, 1993, Mr. Rick Ferguson offers the following response to concerns expressed with regard to the existing gravel operations and the proposed Ferguson Beach Limited operation. And basically, point number 1 is that in the event that truck traffic or truck activity from Northern, Pritchard, and Meany pits follows the same general route as that followed by Ferguson Beach Limited, then Ferguson Beach Limited will withdraw aggregate from stockpiles placed in strategic locations along State Route 104 in the town of Scribe, as I mentioned earlier. They have a location up there that they can stockpile material from. That's also a measure of the scale of their operation. If they had a large operation like Northern, Meany, or Pritchard, there's no possible way they could do that unless they had an extremely large site, which they don't. As an example, as I mentioned, as an example of the scale of their operation in 1993, they hauled a total of 5,000 cubic yards. And then the next sentence says, Ferguson Beach Limited conducts the majority of their work in Scriba and will therefore turn right from the pit onto County Route 85, then north on County Route 8, and then to County Route 45. Point number 2, in the environmental assessment, it was indicated that a maximum of 6 truckloads per hour would exit from the pit. Since Ferguson Beach Limited has 2 trucks, one being a tandem axle 10-wheel truck, the other one being a 6-wheel truck, this maximum condition would only be reached when the project is in close proximity to the pit. Over the past 3 years, Ferguson Beach Limited has hired only 1 additional truck to assist in the hauling of aggregate, and that was for Rick's driveway for his house. However, Mr. Robert Ferguson, Sr., is residing on the site and will conduct and monitor pit operations whenever the pit is in use, and will be readily available for any complaints with regard to its operation. He lives just around the corner on County Route 8, about 2 houses down from the intersection, south of the intersection. Ferguson Beach Limited has decided to evaluate the geologic conditions along the east bank of the proposed pit based on information obtained from the installation of Mr. Ferguson's water well. Rick and his dad dug their water well. It's a dug well. It goes to about 22 feet. They encountered water at 22 feet, but the water in the well obviously rose. Ferguson Beach Limited dug a series of test holes north to south along the east bank. They dug, prior to initiating the activity, they dug a series of test holes within the pit itself and along the east bank, and they encountered no water. So it's a complicated problem geologically, so it will have to be evaluated further before they proceed in that area. That's the last area that they're to the mine. In each case, they did not encounter water to a depth of 15 feet. However, they have decided to evaluate the conditions further because of this new information. Therefore, the east bank will be mined last, and after evaluation is completed, the remainder of the pit will be mined only to remove the high areas down to the level of the adjacent land. Thus, mining will not impact the water table when they take out the 4-way dip features or the noses. This point number 4, the screen to be used to process the aggregate has a capacity that is too small to be regulated by the Department of Environmental Conservation. It's a Reed screen all 40. Processing will only take place to satisfy the material requirements of Ferguson Beach Limited, and there is no change in their position on this particular matter. They're not going to sell from the pit. In addition, there will be no retail sales from the pit. Also, the processing area will be moved 450 feet further south from the present proposed location. So they're moving the processing area further south from County Route 85. Ferguson Beach Limited maintains that if the screening equipment is used in the pit, that it will be of a size and a vintage that will not be regulated by the DEC. This isn't a point that I mentioned earlier. I neglected to mention this, but it will also restrict the size of their operation, because if they keep the processing plant to a size that's that doesn't require a permit from the DEC, then they can't go over a certain capacity. Point number 5, the Hall Road entrance will be moved to the east side of Lewis Cemetery, as the Town of Granby Planning Board has requested. And point number 6, Ferguson Beach Limited indicated that they will reclaim concurrently, and further that 5 acres or less of land will be exposed at any one time, that the site will be reclaimed to agricultural use after mining is completed. Limiting the exposed acreage to a minimum of 5 acres or less will further ensure that no significant change in scope and scale of this operation occurs. Finally, we feel that the complaints registered with regard to this application are in response to the existing operations primarily, and without regard to the self-imposed conditions offered by Rick, the above, and the mine land use application. All of these conditions, except the ones that obviously imposed by the planning board that Rick has agreed to, are self-imposed by Rick. Mr. Ferguson has from the beginning of the town review process been willing to accommodate legitimate potential concerns, and he obviously remains so. And basically that is the letter. We do have a letter from the planning board also, the county planning board. And
I'd be glad. Is it to you, or is that the same one I have? Yeah, I can read that one.
Okay.
No problem.
That's
Do you happen to have, per chance with you, the copy of the letter from the planning board of the prison chief?
Yes. Okay.
Thanks.
That might be our response also. Yeah, that's our letter agreeing to his conditions. We can make a copy of that too, if you wish.
Thank you. We should all probably read this. We should read it out loud. Okay. Just because we haven't seen this, you folks might just as well know about this too. This is the September 13th letter from the town of Granby Planning Board to the Fergusons. Dear Mr. Ferguson, this letter is in reference to your above application and your appearance with Rob Snyder of Northeast Geological Services at the September 7th Planning Board meeting. At the meeting, you indicated that the application should be considered as a small operation. You also indicated that the mining would service new homeowners in the area that needed gravel for septic, driveways, etc. The following is a list of concerns and alternatives which were discussed. 1. The entrance and exit road is in a very dangerous location which you agreed to move to a higher ground. This would give trucks better clearance coming out of the mine and make them more visible to traffic coming down the hill on County Route 85. The trees from the cemetery now block the vision of oncoming cars, which is a very dangerous situation. In addition, truck entrance and exit signs are needed. 2. Recommended hours of operation. Weekdays 7 a.m. to 4:30 to 5 o'clock. Saturdays 7 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. No operation on Sundays or holidays. 3. Because of the close proximity of other operating mines in the area, the board understands that you agreed to modify and contain dust, noise, and traffic when necessary. 4. DEC approval should be obtained to do any logging or create ponds near wetlands in Rice Creek, which empties directly into Lake Ontario. 5. No dynamiting or crushing of large rocks should be done on the site. 6. The area is zoned agricultural and will remain agricultural unless a special use permit is obtained from the town of Granby. The balance of your application and environmental assessment forms meet planning board review requirements. We have requested additional copies of the application from Rob Snyder's office so we can send them to other interested agencies. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let us know. Sincerely, Town of Granby Planning Board, William Jones, Chairman, signed. It's probably just as important to read the response. This is dated September 23rd. Dear Mr. Jones, I have discussed your letter dated September 13th, 93 with Rick Ferguson. Rick has no objection to your list of concerns and alternatives. We both are quite sure that this operation will not create a significant impact on the surroundings. You will be receiving from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation a copy of the application previously submitted to you once the DEC deems the application complete. When you receive the application from the DEC, you will have approximately 30 days in which to review the application and present recommendations to the DEC with regard to most of the very points covered in your letter to Mr. Ferguson. We are requesting that the letter submitted to Mr. Ferguson be submitted to the Department of Environmental Conservation in an effort to eliminate or significantly shorten the town's 30-day review process, since the Planning Board has already completed its review. We will include the town on any future submissions to the DEC so that you will be assured of having the same information. The DEC has not made any requests for additional information to date. Sincerely, Rob Snyder.
Basically, that remains the case. They've completed the review, issued a negative declaration. We went through the public comment period, and as I stated before, they have opted to reopen the public comment period. And there is another point that I didn't discuss, and that is that the pond that we're proposing will be fed purely by precipitation and not by groundwater. So it will be fed by runoff coming from the adjacent upland.
Runoff by what?
From the adjacent uplands.
If we need a copy of it, we should make a copy of it.
Yes.
You can give me a pen.
Sure.
Thank you, Rob. As Rob already mentioned, well, let me just read this. Please be advised that the period for expressing comments and/or concerns to Mr. Kevin Bliss, the DEC, regarding the above issue, meaning the Ferguson Beach Limited application, has been extended to December 24th, 1993. All comments are to be made to Mr. Bliss at the Cortland DEC office, and the telephone number is 607-753-3059. This will remain here if anybody...
May I make a comment?
Yeah.
The telephone number is incorrect. Kevin
Thank you.
Kevin is in Syracuse at 426-7400, and the number in Cortland is 3095, not 3059.
Wow, sorry. Syracuse is...
426
Yes.
7400,
Thank you.
and
Cortland?
is 3095.
3095 is what it says here.
Oh, is it? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said 5.
Yeah. No, sorry.
Okay, my mistake.
I may have said... Okay. 95. Well, it's here if anybody's interested in it. Sorry. That was my mistake. This has been submitted, this application has been submitted to the Oswego County Planning Board for their review. They've responded back to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I will read that letter. It's dated November 3rd, 93. Dear Ms. Summers, the above referenced matter was submitted to the Oswego County Planning Board for review pursuant to Article 12B, Section 239L and M of the New York State General Municipal Law. The applicant is requesting a special use permit for the operation of a wet and dry surface unconsolidated gravel mine located on the southwest corner of the intersection of County Routes 8 and 85 in the A Agricultural Zoning District. The Oswego County Planning Board considered this matter at its meeting on November 2nd, 1993, and recommends approval with the following modifications. 1. If the access road is to be located as designated on the site plan, then appropriate warning signage should be located along the westbound lane of County Route 85. This will alert drivers of the hidden access road at the south side of County Route 85, west of Lewis Cemetery. Any signage denoting the access road should be made in accordance with the County Highway Department approval and placement standards. For placement requests and further information regarding signs on county roads, contact Gary Gilson at 349-3440 of the Oswego County Highway Department. A possible side road lift sign and truck auxiliary sign may be required. 2. If the access road is relocated, then the plan should be resubmitted for County Planning Board review. Under New York State law, if the local board should elect to act contrary to the County Planning Board recommendation, it must pass a resolution specifically stating why it is not following that recommendation and must pass that resolution by a 1+ majority vote. Also, a copy of any such resolution must be forwarded to the County Planning Board. Sincerely, Karen B. Noyes, Planner 2. we've received notice of complete application from New York State DEC. Which anybody can see if they'd like. The pertinent information is the following. The State Environmental Quality Review, seeker, determination was that it's a type 1 action and will not have a significant effect on the environment. A coordinated review with other agencies was performed and a negative declaration is on file. The seeker lead agency is the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Contact person and signed or initialed actually by Kevin Bliss. At this time, I'd like to open the meeting up for statements from the floor. Before we do that, I'd like to establish some ground rules since we have a large room full of people here. It's the purpose of the Zoning Board of Appeals to deal with facts and not emotions. Therefore, please stick to the facts when possible while speaking. Also, it is obviously important that everyone here present have their say if they so wish. Due to the number of people present, please try to be brief and succinct. If you will stand when recognized as having the floor, and if you will state your name and address, please, and show us on a map that we have up here where you live, we can get started with your comments and or questions. Sir, you have your hands full of paper. Your name, please.
My name is Russell Eggleston. I'm an attorney. My office is in Mantydale, New York. I represent Mr. and Mrs. Fred White, Leona Ferreter, Dennis and Lynn Lyons, and Tim Maxson. At the outset, I'd like to state that I recognize and appreciate the good faith of all the parties and boards that are involved here. This is a complicated matter, and one where there are several legal issues that must be addressed. I have written a lengthy letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Could you speak a little louder, please?
Yes, I have written a lengthy letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals dealing with the issues here. I've studied your zoning law. I have what purports to be a complete file of all the papers in the matter as of 2 days ago. I've studied them at length. I studied the Mined Land Reclamation Law and the Environmental Conservation Law implementing that mine reclamation law. On the basis of that study, I prepared this memorandum, which I would respectfully request that the board members might take their leisure to review this before taking any action, because I believe it does contain several legal matters to be addressed, and it does set forth the concerns of the citizens, particularly the clients whose names I read at the outset. I will hand to the board the copies of this letter at this time. And attached to this letter is a petition signed by many dozens of citizens concerning this matter. I concerned in the matter is that I was unable to find any application in the folder, in the file, addressed to this board requesting any action to be taken. I was unable to find any application to the planning board requesting that any action be taken. There was no notice of rejection by the building inspector, nor was there any notice of appeal to the zoning board of appeals. And technically, I respectfully submit that this board does not have jurisdiction in the absence of an application to this board for relief. It's a technical matter, but it is a legal issue, which I believe is correctly stated here. Your regulations set out a requirement under the special permit requirements that you be furnished with 2 copies of a map drawn 1 inch to 100 feet, showing the land and all the land within 200 feet, and all buildings, the structures, utilities, drainage easements, water courses, lot lines, blocks, lot lines, names of owners, and so forth. And also, there should be submitted a topographic survey showing the lands at 2-foot intervals or contours. And this must be signed by a licensed professional, be it an engineer or a surveyor. Now, that language is out of your own zoning ordinance. That is something that everyone is bound by. Everyone at this table, the people in this room, the applicant, and so on. This is your law. But in addition to that, there is a provision in the state education law appearing in section 7209 that requires that no official of a municipality may receive or accept any plans which do not bear the signature and seal of a licensed professional who prepared those plans. And one of the specific items in your zoning ordinance is that these plans must be certified to the township, certifying it as to accuracy. So the plans which have been filed do not have any such certification. There is no showing that they have been made by a licensed land surveyor or by an engineer. Now, these are your requirements. They're not something that we are just coming up with. This is your laws. Now, in the absence of that, I respectfully have to suggest that there is nothing really for you to act on. There's no application. There are no maps which are drawn in the manner which your law requires. So in view of those 2 particular concerns, we have to deal with the threshold issue of whether the board has any jurisdiction to call or hold this public hearing. While these may be matters of technicality, they do affect people's rights. They surely affect the rights of the applicant. They affect the rights of the many citizens here that are appearing and concerned with this. And so we are bound, all of us, by your own laws, and that's what I have dealt with, and precisely that. The next issue I'd like to address is the fact that the New York State Mine Reclamation Law and the DEC regulations implementing it make provision that those portions of any local law dealing with mining operations are superseded by the state law. In other words, no town, city, village, whatever in this state can enact any laws governing the operation, the method of operation of mining. That is left entirely to the DEC. However, as to reclamation, as opposed to mining, that's an entirely different proposition. There, when you're dealing with reclamation, any municipality can enact regulations that are more stringent than those set forth by the Department of Environmental Conservation. When you review the zoning law of the town of Granby, there are a number of inconsistencies, and they happen because amendments are made here and there and may not have been as thoroughly considered as it might be. It happens everywhere. But it is clear that the present state of the zoning law is such that it does not recognize this distinction, and some of these provisions superseded by the state environmental conservation law. The zoning law should be revised to correct those things. And the reason why it should be revised is so that that protections which are available can be inserted in the zoning law to protect not only the applicant, but also the citizens. As it is now, there's some serious deficiencies in it. The DEC application shows that the total area here is 71 acres, and some 30 is going to be mined in the operation proposed. 30 acres is a pretty good chunk of land. Now, I recognize it says in the applications this will be drawn out over a period of 25 years, and that's a considerable time. But that also should remind us that the applicant, in his very best good faith, cannot represent that he's going to own that land 24 years from now. He can't represent how big his business is going to be 24 years from now. Surely the town is not going to tell him, you can't buy another truck, you can't increase your business. That would be unthinkable. So I recognize the applicant is stating in good faith what he believes today, but none of us knows what's going to be the case 20 or 25 years from now. And so I think we have to recognize that. As to the various impacts that may result from this operation, the DEC report as to issues of mitigation uses explanations which perhaps might leave something to be desired. They cast them off or dismiss them. Well, this is a small operation. I appreciate that. Right now it is a small operation. But I think we must ask ourselves, does the fact that it is small in itself mitigate problems which may arise? Now, I speak to this issue with some deep concern as far as these applicants or these objectors, my clients, are concerned, for the reason that in 1942, I moved to Valley Drive in the city of Syracuse on the edge of the city. I'm about 3/4 of a mile from the Saunders gravel bed. Some of you may have seen Saunders trucks around. It was a small operation back in 1942. It is an immense operation now. There are hundreds of trucks of Saunders and everyone else who wants to do business up there, back and forth on the road I live on every day. There are berms built up along the outbound traffic side of the highways leading away from this operation. Those berms are built up of spillage, of sand, of gravel, of dust that have fall through the cracks of the gates and spill over the sides of the truck. It is real. These mounds, these berms, are generally about 1 to 1.5 feet high. I've called the Department of Public Works in Syracuse, asking them if they would use their grader to push these banks back into one of my fields, which is lower level in the road, so that the road would not be just pocketed with water trapped in between the sides of the road. Now, that's just spillings from trucks. That's dust. It is sand. It is gravel. Those things do fall, and they do leave their evidence, and it certainly is evidence in my personal experience. As to noise, there's a screening machine in the Saunders operation. I know it's there. I can hear it every darn day. It's a roar. There's no silence in that valley anymore. Between the trucks and the screening machine, there is noise. Now, I realize we have to live with some of these things, and I realize these people are talking of mitigating the effects of these things. They don't say how they're going to control dust pollution. They do recognize in the engineering report that, let me find the exact here. I don't want to here representing things unfairly. This regards the airborne dust. A northeast wind will generate little or no impact since the area is southwest of the pit are undeveloped. I was under the impression, and you folks know I don't know this, but I thought this was an area of prevailing northwest winds. If it's northwest winds, those winds would seriously affect the people whom I represent. It says in here, airborne dust can be injurious to horses, so it's very important to monitor dust levels and initiate dust control measures if necessary. Well, if it's dangerous to horses, it sure has got to affect people. That appears on page 22 of the statement filed with DEC. I bring these things up not because they represent proof in this proceeding, which I don't believe they do. This is a DEC matter, and nothing in here has been key to your zoning law requirements, but they are statements which have been handed to you. As to noise pollution, it's stated here at page 22, the level of impacts will be mitigated by the low scale of the operations. Well, I'm not sure what that means, and I say that respectfully. The level of impacts will be mitigated by the low scale of the operation. The greatest potential impact is for truck travel at the access point along Cunningham Road. The entrance to the road will probably be built up to lessen the steepness of the grade when exiting the road. I know it is difficult to prepare these statements like this, and the preparer has to be careful he doesn't unnecessarily bind his client. That doesn't make sense. But the boards involved must be concerned with, are these representations or are they generalities? Are they something that by which the applicant is going to be bound by? The only way that an applicant can be bound by is if their conditions are set out in any approval resolution. And if necessary, those conditions are guaranteed by security, that they'll be furnished to the board to guarantee to the board that these things will be done. And gravel mining is an issue that always becomes a thorny one in any township. There are several townships that I do represent, so I see the other side of the fence. I know what their problems are and what their concerns are. I know the necessity of having gravel beds, but this is a tough subject to deal with. And the only way one can fairly deal with it is deal with it right according to your own regulations. And it may be necessary in instances to revise or update those regulations, which I respectfully suggest may well be the case in this township. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. There's a question of visual pollution. I have not visited this site, so I don't know whether it would be appropriate to have screening or buffering or something around the perimeter of this. I know that screening and buffering and plantings and vegetation is used to lessen the travel or the intensity of sound migrating from a given operation. That is a possibility, but that's something that I believe should be addressed. I think a serious question I think does develop that these people are in business, and they're in the business to make money, and there is nothing wrong with that. But if they have the opportunity to grow, then so does this operation grow, and so does the possible impacts upon the people in this room whom I represent. So I have concerns particularly as to the purposes set forth in the zoning law for the enactment of this zoning law. And those purposes include, among other things, the conservation and enhancement of value of property, assurances of privacy for residences and freedom from nuisances and things harmful to the senses, protection of the community against unsightly, obtrusive, and noisome land uses and operation, enhancement of aesthetic aspects throughout the entire community in maintenance of its present character and natural beauty. So these are the things that the town board decided were the purposes of zoning. These are the things that we should be committed to trying to fulfill as we deal with this zoning ordinance. I would respectfully suggest that there are issues here that would appear to run counter to these purposes, and that if anything is to be done, those purposes should be recognized. The people whom I represent have such a long-standing deep concern and have written letters to the town board and to the planning board, and I believe this board, expressing their concern about the proliferation of gravel beds and the impacts it's having on their day-to-day life, making it no longer a desirable place in which to live. I know that my place is not a desirable place in which to live. The value of it is just dropped because of the intensity of the operations in this gravel bed. It's inescapable. I recognize also that it is possible that reclamation programs concerning a discontinued gravel bed can be implemented so that a gravel bed does in fact look like a good neighbor. But more often than not, and this, I don't know what's going to happen here, no one does, but more often than not, either the owner is gone, the former owner is gone, or whatever, the site is no longer suitable for anything else, the gravel is exhausted, and so it's left. And it's left as a community eyesore. That shouldn't happen. DEC intends that it does not happen, but it does, because DEC doesn't have the manpower to enforce its own regulations and conditions it attaches to these applications. The question can legitimately rise, whether this township has the manpower and so forth to enforce conditions that may attach to any approval. The folks whom I represent have long solid solutions to this problem. And one of the solutions which was broached with the town board a bit ago involves giving the town a brief opportunity to regather itself and deal with this thing in accordance with and not in conflict with the environmental conservation law, so that the awkward provisions or the clearly superseded provisions of the zoning law can be revised appropriately. And accordingly, they have petitioned the town board for the temporary enactment of a moratorium on the issuance of any site plan approvals or special use permit approvals on mining operations, to give the town a chance to expeditiously get at this and put it in shape and then deal with it. That seems like a reasonable thing. Now, the resolution has been prepared. The two of the town board members have in fact signed a petition to the supervisor requesting that a special meeting be called immediately to address this. And according to town law section 62, the supervisor is bound by that section of law to call such a special meeting to consider this. So the point is, the clients whom I represent are not sitting on their feet. They aren't dragging this out. They aren't doing anything to delay this. They aren't saying we need 6 months to repair a petition. It is done, and here it is. A copy of it has been filed with the supervisor, so I'm informed. But this may give the town the chance to take a deep breath and to restructure these provisions, which clearly need reworking, and so they can deal with this and other applications in a manner that is fair to the town, which gives which helps fulfill these purposes set out on page 3 of my letter, which is the quotation of purposes from the zoning law, and which should result in putting to bed issues in the township concerning operations of gravel beds that, in other words, it might end up representing what Mr. Ferguson wants to do, because his representations are certainly a little more mellow than what's been going on here and most other towns, as I understand. But nevertheless, these things need to be put in a legal forum. I'm concerned with what was read at the early part of the meeting here, where the planning board was making these various recommendations and so forth. I'm concerned for the reason that there's a provision in the zoning law on page 33 for a site plan approval by the planning board, and that site plan approval process requires a public hearing by the planning board. I didn't hear any mention made, nor did I find any record in the file of any public hearing being held. So for that reason, I think we have to consider whether those recommendations, although I'm sure they're made in good faith, were at least premature. And so that those factors, those criteria set forth on page 33, I respectfully suggest should be addressed. The special use permit standards for the are set out. I'm sure this board's aware of. It's on page 38 and separately on page 12 and on page 23. The review of my nearly illegible notes, and I appreciate the attention of the board here. This is a complex issue. I do again respectfully request the board might address the more detailed notes which I have set out in the letter or memorandum addressed to this board, and that the board take cognizance of the fact that there is now pending before the town board a petition to establish a short-term moratorium to get so these things can be put together by your planning board or whoever is going to be designated to do it. In the full text of the proposed local law to establish this moratorium is set forth in the resolution. So again, you have it before you. It's not something that's speculative. This is in fact, it has been delivered. What the town board does with it is up to the town board. I appreciate the attention of this board, and I say again, I appreciate the good faith that is intended by all the boards and people presenting matters in this difficult subject. But I think we've got some legal issues here that must be clear beforehand. And in the present state of affairs, I have to again say that there is simply no jurisdiction for this board to exercise in the absence of compliance with your own laws. And until that's done, I think the board doesn't have any options but to deal with it as I've suggested in the letter. I thank you very much.
Chair, would you please give names of your clients?
Oh yes, it's
Slow, so I can.
okay. Mr. and Mrs. Fred White, Leona Farrager, Dennis and Lynn Lyons, and Tim Maxon.
Now, would you show on the map where they live in relation to this
I
proposed?
must ask them, please, to show that, because I'm not that, because I want to be sure that we got it right.
I believe this is the pit. Just find the closest one to the pit, and that's me.
Yeah,
This is White.
you're Dennis Lyons.
I'm Dennis Lyons,
Thank you.
and this is my home. This is approximately where Tim Maxon lives, and this is where Mrs. Farrager lives. I also would add, well,
Wait a second.
I don't have.
We aren't finished with your attorney yet.
Okay.
I assure you that you'll have your say.
Thank you.
I think I called on the wrong person to start with, Mr. Eccleston, and all due respect.
I jumped up and I...
No, that's okay. You had the floor. The first thing that I remember was, I believe you made the statement, and I'd like to clarify it, that the Zoning Board of Appeals has not received an application.
Well, at least
From the
there was none in the
Fergusons.
file.
Okay, because I have in front of me a notarized copy of an application for a special use permit to the Zoning Board of Appeals of the town of Granby, which was received by the ZBA on October 15th, '93.
Well, I had to be puzzled as to why it wasn't a part of the town clerk's records.
Not in the clerk's records. We checked through the-
Maybe because it's here. I can't answer that.
Shouldn't a copy be in
The normal procedure is that all applications go to our building inspector and enforcement officer, and then he channels them to the proper places depending upon what the request is.
But in view of that unexpected development, Mike, before the evening's over, I have time to quickly look at that application and make comments if necessary.
Sure. Just like I would like to have our town attorney look at your letter too.
By all means.
So, obviously. As a matter of fact,
In fact, I have copies for the town attorney of my papers.
oh, he's standing right there, Mr. Wally Osmond.
Copies for the show.
Respect to this, if this is true, should we go Okay. I believe it is a complete application. Okay. Is it signed? Which defines as to whether or not it's a completed application. Correct. This one isn't signed. Where'd Rob go? Is, yeah, there he is. Right. Rob, do you have a copy of your surveys and stuff that are signed?
By a licensed professional engineer.
Yes.
That requirement, geologists are not required to be licensed in New York State at this time. And that requirement, I've encountered that requirement with other towns, and they waived that requirement because of my experience in geology and with my plans in general. And I believe I spoke to the planning board with regard to that. And I think they accepted the application.
Okay. Really great. Well, wait a second, because we're trying to get a reading as to, the first thing that I have to determine is whether, we've been challenged as to whether we should be here tonight or not, and I think it makes sense to figure that, the answer to that challenge out first. These are in Murphy. Murphy Road, I guess it is. Is Bingham Road, or was Bingham Road previously Murphy Road?
On that one,
Yes.
this
Okay.
this is the main road.
Okay, because that's
Yeah.
what I would know it
It
as.
starts right here, terminates right there.
Yep, okay.
That's
and
a pretty sharp curve, right?
Yep.
Way down.
Yep, sure does. I mean, it's described as being Murphy Road. That's why
I think They call this 2 minutes.
Yep. And they call this Minetto Lysander Road,
Yeah.
which is 8. Sure.
Henry, why don't you go along, proceed with the hearing, and let me check. Well, I feel.
Dennis.
Dennis Lyons.
Dennis Lyons, you've already pointed yourself out on the map.
Yep, I am a resident, a long-time resident, I might add. I was wondering, we had a letter sent, I think, from the town of Granby Planning Board, December 8th, to your board. Could you read that letter to us, please?
Sure.
I know everyone's been concerned about the planning board's input, and I don't know if they ever gave any yes or no to it, but I'd like to at least have that read, please.
Before I read this letter, which I have a copy of here, after I read this letter, I will make a copy. Excuse me. December 8th, 1993. This is to Beverly Summers, Secretary, Zoning Board of Appeals. Dear Beverly, obviously the subject, I apologize, is Ferguson Beach mining application. By copy of this letter to you and other members of the ZBA, the Planning Board is exercising its responsibility according to the Granby Zoning Ordinance, page 35A, number 6, referrals to the Planning Board, copy attached. In that the Planning Board shall submit an advisory to the ZBA offering opinion and comments before the ZBA meets in a public hearing. The Town of Granby Planning Board strongly recommends denying a special use permit to Mr. Ferguson at this time, as the application is inaccurate, has several contradictions, and is not in the best interest of the town. The area is presently saturated with mining operations, and many of the neighbors will be in attendance at your public hearing on December 16th with clearly defined reasons for not allowing this application at the present time. The Granby Planning Board trusts that the ZBA members will each have been provided with a full application, and that each member will take the time to not only study the application but to visit the area before the hearing. If you have any questions or require any further information, please do not hesitate to call me or Elsie Massett. Sincerely, Town of Granby Planning Board, William Jones, Chairman. Now my comment. I received this in the mail on Saturday the 11th, letter written on the 8th at 2:30 in the afternoon, I talked to Mr. William Jones, whom the letter is from. And I stated that we appreciated as a board the letter from the Planning Board with opinion and comments. I asked if he could please send us a new letter, though, that lists and explains the inaccuracies instead of the blatant term of inaccuracies, or the broad scoping term of inaccuracies, and explain the contradictions and the discussions of the Planning Board on this application, also the proof and the basis of the clearly defined reasons of the neighbors. I was assured that the zoning board would receive a fresh letter. It is not.
Well, I believe in the letter it does say clearly defined reasons will be done by us neighbors. If you want us to go into it, we're ready.
No, because one of the first things was the inaccuracies involved in it, so.
Can I say something, Chairman of the Planning Board? Can I be recognized, Henry?
Sure, and it's an outgoing letter also.
Okay. Now, first, we had a review, we talked to Mr. Rob Snyder. He came in with his application. We had a preliminary discussion. It was at a regular meeting. It wasn't a site plan hearing. He wasn't invited to come in. And we went over it, we quickly reviewed it, and we come up with some of these things. We looked at the application, we looked at the road hidden down behind the cemetery, and we went over all those things that you said. If, at the site plan hearing, we approved it at the site plan hearing, these were some of the things that we wanted to have taken care of. And you have that letter, you know about all those things. I discussed all those things with you during the telephone conversation. And then after I talked to you, I found out that these people had hired a lawyer, and then he was going to point out to you all the inaccuracies in the application. And I thought a legal attorney would probably do a better job than me. And as far as, I think, I was misrepresented at the beginning here. When, you said the planning board had approved it. We had not had a site plan hearing yet. How could we approve it?
Well, wait,
that was what started out.
Bill, excuse me.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. What I've asked is for you to comment on your letter.
No, I don't.
Later.
Don't try to play ring around the rosy with me.
No, I'm not trying to
That's
play.
what you're doing, Henry. They commented on my letter. They have a concern here. They have a real concern, and they have an attorney, and he's the one that should be commenting on the inaccuracies in this application. And when we have a site plan hearing, we'll go through that, and I'll point them all out to you and to him. We have not had a hearing. Now, I think you ought to get down to business and take a look at the situation and instead of trying to twist things around like you've been doing right from the beginning here. You should have done more investigating. You should have all these things. Why should I have to do them for you?
Bill,
Yeah, Bill. Mr. Smoothie, go ahead.
Mr. Jones,
Yeah.
sir, if you're commenting on your letter,
Never mind. Forget it. Go on with the hearing.
certainly we
I'm
can't
not gonna
take
play-
the,
I'm not going to play psychological games with you, Henry. I know what you're doing. Now, why don't you go on with the hearing? When we have our site plan hearing, we'll take care of our end of it.
No comment done by the planning board?
No, you may not. I gave you my comment.
And
I
I read,
don't wanna
and I read
comment
the
any
comment
further.
then.
I don't want any more
Okey-doke.
discussion with you at this time.
Okay. Comment has been read. Other questions from the floor, Lynn?
Yes, my name is Lynn Lyons. I just wanted to read a letter that I wrote to the planning board on November 12th, 1993. Dear Mr. Jones, this is a request for information. Please provide the following information. As the above applicant provided the additional information and site plan modifications requested in the planning board's letter of September 13th, 1993. If so, please provide me with copies of all information and modifications received by the planning board. Number 2, a copy of the communication or notice to the town zoning board of appeals showing whether or not the planning board approved the site plan as submitted by the above applicant. Please mail me the information to me at the above address or call me to stop by the town office and pick it up. I would be very glad to reimburse the town for the cost of copying the material. I shall expect an answer within 7 days of the date of this letter and request that all responses to this inquiry be made in writing. Very truly yours, Lynn Lyons. I also sent a copy to Steve Lund, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the Town Board. I got a request. This was November 22nd, 1993. Dear Mrs. Lyons, I am in receipt of your letter of November 12th, which I received at the town office on November 18th regarding the above referenced matter. With regard to your question number 1, the answer is no. Mr. Snyder has not supplied the planning board with any further information. Number 2, there is no copy of the planning board's approval sent to the zoning board of appeals as the board has not approved the application. I did have a telephone conversation with Bev Summers on November 12th, and she indicated to me that a ZBA public hearing has not been scheduled at this time, and she was awaiting information from the DEC. I am enclosing a copy of the negative declaration from the DEC, which I received the same day I picked up your letter. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to call me. Town of Granby Planning Board, Elsie Massa. So I believe this site plan has not been approved by the planning board. And I also, was there any more information sent to you from Mr. Snyder that was on different maps and things? Have you received? No, thank you.
Young lady on the right over here?
My name is Julie Engel, and I live right across the road from Mr. Ferguson. My concern is our well is 16 feet dug. We have no problems with water. We have all the water we can ask for, and our concerns are if our water does go dry, is Mr. Ferguson going to put us in a new one? Also, my brother-in-law lives next door. He has no water now, and my sister-in-law lives right next door to him, and they also have no water. So there is a concern for us for our water.
Is this an all year round problem?
No.
Summer only?
That they don't have any water?
Yes.
It's all year for them, right? Dry in the summer for them.
Across from Robert Ferguson.
Yes, yes, in the home, the home that was built up on the corner.
Okay. Yep. Yes.
I'm Joan Fontan, and I live just south of the Bigham exit on County Route 8, which is about a mile, I'd say, from south of 85 and County Route 8, where Mr. Ferguson's home is. I'm hearing a lot of talk about what's happening on the Ridge Road and what's happening on the mining of the dust and stuff, but this is in my front yard, which is, like I said, a mile south, okay? I called the county about a month ago, and I had an area probably as long as this table, probably as deep as this table, that was just gouged out, because all summer long to keep the trucks. And these are the trucks, because I'm there and I watch it all the time. Now, the county came and they covered up an area, another area, okay? But this is stuff that's just simply, that they haven't touched yet, they didn't cover them. But I just want you to see that it's not just County Route, or Ridge Road, or County 85, this is County Route 8. And this is just part of what I picked up this morning, but see, the idea also is, we walk between 7 and 7:40 every morning, okay? We see these trucks. Now, what is the time that those trucks will be hauling gravel? What time, you know?
It depends on which pit.
Uh,
It's either 7 or 8.
They're all the
Okay.
same.
What time is it supposed to be?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock? Okay, last week, it was before the weekend, it was either Wednesday or Thursday. We heard the pounding towards Route 3, okay? Because we're coming off the Bingham Road walking, right? So we hear the pounding. I get home about 7:35. As we're getting to my front driveway, okay, on the curb, 2 trucks are going towards Granby, full of gravel. 7:35, okay? This was last Wednesday or Thursday, for a fact. I've seen them before, but I documented this one because I knew you were having a meeting, and I thought, well, that might be some input for you. But this is stuff that the trucks are doing. This has been all summer long.
Excuse me, you heard the pounding towards Route 3
As
or
we're
towards?
coming down Bingham Road, going east, okay, before I get to County Route 8, about halfway down, past Friars that way. Okay, we can hear it off to the right, the pounding, okay?
So off towards County Route 85.
No, County Route 3,
Okay.
okay? But as we got onto County Route 8, that's my front yard, which is just around, the corner. We saw the trucks going, and we purposely stopped, checked our clock time, and they were going by full of dirt, gravel.
Towards
So,
Granby?
Manalo.
Towards Manalo.
So I'm taking it might be Puget, I don't know who knows. But what I'm stressing is, they're talking about the mining area on 85 and Ridge Road and all that area. But what about the mining areas that are coming down through a back and forth, back and forth? Right. So all the damage isn't doing around there with the mining. This is what you got to take into consideration.
Sure.
Okay? But wasn't sure what time it was. The hours are supposed to be hauling, but they are hauling way before 8 o'clock because we see them all the time.
I think Sam's is 7 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken.
Was it northbound or southbound?
It was going that way, towards Manila.
Northbound.
What color were the trucks?
Probably red. I don't know if they're, but I'm not sure the color. All we were interested in the fact that it was gravel and the time. That's what my concern was. I know.
Concerned because of the time, that we want to know.
The time was that time. And I was under the impression they're not supposed to haul for 8 o'clock.
Man in hand has a permit.
Well,
7
what I
o'clock.
want clarified, I'm just telling you, but they go by, they're always on the road early in the morning anyhow. That's what I'm trying to say. But this is what's happening on County Route 8, so it's not just the Ridge Road or 85. This is County Route 8 coming to Granby, between Granby and Middle. So I just want you to. This is one of the reasons why you should take into consideration. before you get another mining permit, because he's only about, what, a mile from where I live, this new one is. And those trucks are gonna be hauling, and those trucks haul, and they do not keep the speed limit, because they're going boom, boom, boom. You can't go across your road to get your paper, because you're taking it away from your hand.
Mr. Fontana? You forgot something there.
I think that belongs to the town.
It's county road.
Oh, that's
We
right.
have lots more if you want it, out there.
Sam Puglia's pit has a 7 a.m.
Fontana, would you like to approve of the...
Yes, I will. Yes, I will.
Any other questions? Sir?
Yeah, my name's Fred White. We indicated earlier where we live down there, and I have one question. Is it appropriate that the town lawyer confer with Ferguson's lawyer without contacting ours or anything? Is that appropriate action? I don't know. It's the same thing. What do you guys think?
I'm sure that it's fine for Mr. Eggleston to be in on it too.
I'm just wondering why you would confer without even inviting our lawyer. It sounds like it might even be a conflict of interest. I don't know. I have no idea. You asked earlier for a couple examples of inconsistencies and inaccuracies. On the application, the DEC states that the distance of the mining operation of their residences on page 3 of your application is 700 plus or minus feet. There's another application attached to it. There's a question question number 3F. I'm not sure of the actual part of it. It's attached way in the back. I'm not familiar with these applications. I don't do this for a living. But on there, he checked yes and answered the question, will mining occur within 500 feet? So there's a conflict. When I measured the distance from my house to the 40 feet from the property line that's on the property adjacent to the mine, that puts the mining operation 350 feet from my property, and when I pace it off, there's another house that's closer to mine, puts it about 250 feet from that. So there's one example of some inaccuracies and inconsistencies within the application itself. A second example is the applicant states the distance. I don't know why he brought it up. Maybe it's a requirement. The distance from the closest county road is 1,400 feet. That's what, a quarter mile, something like that. And the actual distance to County 5 is about 350 feet. That's two examples that I could bring up just on the top of my head. Thanks.
Thank you. Fred lives.
Excuse me, that's right next to.
I'll show you. I'm sorry.
Don't forget it.
Dennis lives.
That was rude.
The other property I was talking about is this one right here.
Right. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So you're saying that we can't accept, we have to accept the map from the surveyor, and we can't accept the map from the geological consultant?
Yeah, unfortunately, this ordinance was given the authority to waive the requirement.
Okay. But it does state that it has to come certified by the surveyor.
Surveyor or a what?
Right. Yeah. Great. Because they're
If there are any other supplements or amendments that has to be made. Probably get something to do with it. I think the county planning expects to be done.
Yeah, if any other changes made, then they need to do it.
So I think what we do is start the hearing, just adjourn it, and when the application is complete, and when we get back our experience from the planning, county planning, whatever information there is, that we'll reschedule the hearing and notify everybody. We'll do the notice now, just like we always do the night for the first time.
And should we also suggest that it submitted to Steve Lund so that the chain of command goes properly this time? I'm just giving it a can to Duncan, she got last time in error. It wasn't a hearing, no. Planning. Right. Everybody's here.
I would say, let's adjourn it now, because maybe there's a sense of whatever responses I can do. Let's return the application. When you get done, the surveyor or engineer may or may not be the same. So what you might have to do is you might have to figure out, you don't want to have to be doing the same thing all over. Well,
Or I don't know, that's why I'm asking.
No, I think what I'm going to recommend is that we adjourn the hearing until he completes the application. When we have a completed application, it'll be submitted to the county planning board. And then when that's back, then we'll reschedule the hearing and re-notify everybody, but I don't see any sense in continuing the hearing now.
Oh, no.
Well, would that be an amended application or a fresh application?
Well, he's got to complete the application. All right.
For wait, you have to wait for a completed application.
I mean, it would be just like if he brought in, they fucked the man, let's say. He wouldn't do anything with it. Or you might not, you might accept it. You can simply give it with it until it's complete. So, we'll just give him an opportunity to complete the application. It's not deemed completed yet.
Maybe we'll probably stand it.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
We have no best and right certainly at this point.
I would disagree with that. We will, if the map, the signature on the map is the question.
Yeah, I think you should be getting this now, okay? Private discussions over. Let me make a
My name's
statement.
Paul.
We can't hear you.
Okay,
I represent Ferguson.
okay. The board has just been advised that the Town of Granby zoning law requires that all applications be done by a certified surveyor, and that they be signed by a signed and certified by a surveyor.
Or an engineer.
Or an engineer.
The plans to be submitted with.
The plans to be submitted with the application, correct. And as such, since these plans are not that way, then we're going to have to adjourn the hearing and consider it to be an incomplete application at this point. Now, question.
How many days do we have to complete the application? But, see, the thing about this is that the way.
Who is this person?
I'm sorry,
Oh, I did.
you're absolutely right. Give your name, please.
Sure, I
Again.
thought I did.
Yes, you did, but.
Paul Pelkey, I'm representing Rick Ferguson and Robert Ferguson and Ferguson Beach. Limited. I'd rather not get into addressing all the comments that Mr. Eggleston said. However, there's a lot of disagreement. I'm not going to get into the factual things he's stating. I mean, obviously, some of those are just not concerns. I mean, when you're talking about
They
this
aren't
is-
your concern.
Well, he's saying this is going to grow, but I mean, how does it grow when there's never more than 5 acres uncovered at any time, and you're covering up the other acres when you're getting into the next 5-acre block? So, for example, that concern isn't valid at all. Increasing the size of the operation and saying that you're going to...
Wait a second. Allow me to interrupt, please.
Sure.
Because it's, at this point in time, an incomplete application,
Right.
what we have to solve at the moment is
And I agree.
when it's going to
All
be
I
a
want to know
complete
is the
application.
number of days to get this in so that we'll be ready to continue the public hearing at the next meeting.
I don't
Well-
think there's any time limit. A person can apply for a special use permit whenever they want.
Well, is this a special use permit or is this a special permit?
Use permit.
Well, I note by the zoning law that it says
Well, special, the zoning law.
It's a special permit.
It's a special permit.
and I think there's a great distinction that Mr. Hauser advised of if this is a question of first impression before the board. But nonetheless, I would like to try to comply with your time frame, with what you would feel comfortable getting the information so many days before your next meeting. That's all. I recognize we can put it in at any time, but we're once again imposing a self-imposed restriction.
Well, a problem that exists is that we don't hold regular meetings on a scheduled basis. We hold our meetings as needed, as requested, when we have an application before us. Second problem is, I believe...
Henry, could you speak up? They just
Sure.
requested that. I'm
Sure, sorry. A second problem is, I believe that if you give us new information, then we have to submit that to the county planning board again, so that they can see it. If these maps are not certified, I'm not sure what the planning board requirements are as to whether they need to see certified maps or not. If the maps are redrawn and different, then it's a completely new set of maps, and it should probably go to the county planning board as a new set of maps for their review again.
Can I ask what
Of course.
planning board is referred to in 5F1?
It's going to be, I would assume, well, let me look at it. Can't make assumptions anymore.
Good question.
Good question.
Well, this zoning law is sort of hard to work with.
Yeah. We agree. That's why we've been abused for so long here.
Section again, please, I'm sorry, Paul.
Page 23.
Page 23.
Just ask our town attorney. He'll answer that for you, I'm sure. Our town attorney.
It's fine.
Check.
Give me an answer sometime.
Yeah, that would be local.
Well, I don't
Local
think it needs to
planning
be
board.
submitted. This really,
If anything that happens within 500 feet
of the,
of a county,
I
state,
see,
or...
okay, it's not under your zoning ordinance, it's under a different.
That's correct.
Okay, fine, yeah, but under this ordinance, I didn't see that.
That's correct.
Fine, we'd be glad to submit them to the county and submit them to the local as well as your board here.
Okay.
And we'll do that by whatever date you want. You see, the thing about it is they do have associates that meet these requirements. It's just that the planning board seemed to think that wasn't necessary. So what we'll do is we'll approach the county planning board and say, well, here's the same plans, and they're now signed by somebody that you said that didn't need to be signed when we were in front of you, so.
Are these in two?
Yeah, then we have
One, 2 contours.
2-foot quadrants on your,
They're on 5-foot and 10-foot contours on those maps. There's none on 2-foot or 1-foot contours.
all the others are there.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. Okay?
Yeah,
Okay. So in answer to your direct question, we can't give you a date, because we
sure.
don't hold a regular meeting.
So then we'll
You've
send
gotta-
the things in and I'll send the letter to you and ask you to give us a date.
That's right. And we will have, do we have to publish this again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we will have to publish in the paper again an announcement of a public hearing.
Should I send that letter to you then, rather than?
Application goes to zoning board of appeals. Well, complete the application.
All right, we're considering the application filed with competing issue, filing the maps in accordance with the requirements and signs.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah, you can include the copy of the application.
I will send Mr. Eggleston, if he'll give me a card, Kathy, everything that we send to you at the same time.
Very good.
With the map, I can put up tonight, being certified. Generally, somewhat known
the
as where I am.
On the reclamation part. I think the application is in order. Did you? The other case. That's correct.
well, no, it's changed by our
Well, we'll follow those recommendations. We'll take the old recommendations, presuming that the recommendations be the same.
Sure.
And we'll show those on the new plan. And I think that's a really good idea to do.
Just so there's not 2 extra here.
Right, right.
Just as an aside, if, in some of the inconsistencies that Mr. White pointed out.
I can't hear, please.
I beg your pardon?
Can't
Can't
hear.
hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, we're all kind of crowded here. I'm about to suggest that you may want to take into consideration some of the inconsistencies that Mr. White mentioned as far as distances and things, information being a little bit different in the front than in the back, and then that will no longer be of issue.
I was going to ask your stenographer if he could give me a list of those inconsistencies, because I think I was out of the room talking to my client at the time.
They're revising the whole thing.
But, or,
Yeah, you're revising.
No, that's what I said, you're revising the whole thing.
My name's Fred White again. If I might, I personally have nothing against mining as long as it's in accordance with the laws. There's just a lot of, there's other inconsistencies that I'd be glad to personally talk with anybody. If this would have probably popped up in the first place, if we could address this like adults.
be glad to.
The person put the
We
application
want you to
in.
understand something.
All right, I want
Rick
you to understand
Ferguson
something.
is not John
No,
Fitch.
All right.
please.
He has the floor, I believe.
Whoa!
No, let's not go wild.
If you would like to make recommendations, I suggest that you
Do it
make recommendations in the form of a letter as to inconsistencies or whatever. Send a copy to the board and to Mr. Pelkey at the same time.
The other comment I wanted to make, and I think it's really important, that it seems that wherever the surveyor is that did this for you, really gave the impression that everything was on the up and up for Ricky and Dad. But when you came to my front lawn in August sometime, and I asked you if you were gonna put anything up there, you said, no, we're gonna probably mow it down for my in-laws. Put a pole barn up.
And animals.
Hey.
All right.
And that might have changed the whole gist of why this is so important right now to me personally.
We understand that. So I think we need to, in fairness to everybody, have a move for adjournment.
I make the motion to move for adjournment until the application's completed.
Okay, is there a second? All in favor?
Aye. That'll be a problem, I would suggest, first of all.
Okay.
While he's out there,
Henry,
he represents me.
may I ask something?
Sure, meeting is adjourned, so
what-
everything's unofficial.
What did you, what are the results? We couldn't hear you back here.
Oh, all right. The results are that the application was deemed to be
It's not that he got out of
incomplete,
hand or Tom
so
got out
therefore
of
it
hand,
has to
okay?
be completed, and we'll start this shebang all over again at a later date.
Well, the whole thing came to mind from the beginning though, to the neighbors. See, if you hadn't done that, nobody would have been upset.